Right, you're welcome along to World in Union, Balls.ie's weekly rugby show with me, Mick McCarthy, alongside Maurice Brosnan. Maurice has taken a break from, cracking the case of Irish international football to talk a little bit about rugby. You can read some of the stuff on Balls.ie; it's pretty good that he did this weekend. But you did manage to fit in a little bit of rugby this weekend, anyway.
Yeah, I did, thankfully.
Yeah.
But probably, Saturday was probably a lot more enjoyable than Sunday. But no, it was an interesting weekend, right?
We'll talk about Ireland in a minute. We keep waiting for this Six Nations to take off. It hasn't happened yet, but we've got 9 points from 3 games. It's not that bad, but that's just the league table. Really, everything else is poor. We'll get into it in a minute. We'll talk about a brilliant England-Wales game. I rarely have enjoyed a game of rugby so much. I just thought it was brilliant in nearly every way, to be honest. And we'll dissect your rolling team of the Six Nations a little bit later on, and we also have a really interesting guest, another coach making his way abroad.
Yeah, it's I suppose like for Alan Kingsley, which we were talking to, who's the Dragons kicking and skills coach, but it's the story, which is one that we've kind of touched on a couple of times, of somebody who kind of is at a very high level as a player, as a club player, but doesn't kick on to become an international player. So early on in his career starts to focus on coaching. So Alan's story is particularly interesting because he was started in Ireland with the schools game and AIL, has stretched to Australia. He's now obviously in Wales. He's going to slowly making his way up the ladder as he goes. So it'll be even just to see, I think we've seen a real kind of return to kicking as being in vogue this tournament. So to see his own thoughts on that will be interesting. Yeah,
Dragons struggling at the moment, and obviously he went over with Bernard Jackman, who's now not there anymore. But it's interesting to see that Alan is kind of is kicking on there, I suppose. For pardon, the pun was accidental there, and I'm interested in chatting to him because it's a tough job at the moment being any kind of member of the coaching staff on the Dragons, and he obviously, it's his role almost to give them that innovation that they need to kind of like break through a little bit at the moment, which is just something that they're struggling with. So he's got a big job on his hands, and it's just going to be interesting to chat to him about it. So let's talk about the fact that Ireland got a bonus point win in Rome. Job done. No problems here. Everything's fine. Oh, wait, no, sorry. That wasn't the match that we watched at all.
No.
Yeah, no. That was atrocious from Ireland, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, to be honest. I think that, there was a lot wrong, but I also don't think it's as bad as has been made out elsewhere. Like, I think it's such a boring point to make, kind of this constant strive for nuance. But I think there was a lot good and a lot bad in the game, which has just been a feature of them throughout this whole tournament. Right? I kind of think.
Can I just interrupt you really briefly there, because I agree with you that that's true, and I think that we're doing some things well, but there's a lot bad, and the problem is, and this isn't to go into a big fight with the anti-rugby brigade and the anti-hype brigade and all. Just pretend that doesn't exist. This is a team that is rightly being talked about, at least up until a month ago, as a World Cup contender. Yeah. Are we going to win the World Cup? Probably not. Is there a chance they could win it? Yes. Right? That's the truth, okay? But because of that, they have to be... You can't have a lot good and a lot bad.
Oh, yeah.
Any bad at all is going to cost you against New Zealand, South Africa, England...
Yeah,
whoever else is going to be contending.
Especially to the degree of inaccuracy is so
staggering.
Weird for a Joe Schmidt team. I think it was 17 or 16 turnovers. Half of them were handling errors, just like really simple stuff that you just wouldn't ever associate with a Joe Schmidt team or even an Ireland team. To be honest, it's something that we've kind of had down for a long time. I actually think it's a really difficult game for a couple of reasons. It's a difficult game to analyze for people because those kind of mistakes, like a handling error or a player running a wrong line, or Sexton's pass to Earls out the back falling short, or a maul being swallowed up, the amount of times that's down to miscommunication. It's down to whoever's steering the maul not doing it properly. It's down to somebody not knowing a play, and people like me might pretend that we know who's at fault there, but we don't. Like, the only people that really do is Joe Schmidt. In those kind of scenarios, like, he knows who's supposed to command that maul when it's about to break down. He knows who's supposed to run the line for that play. It's dropping short. We kind of don't. You can guess, you might be able to assume, but in terms of actually analysing it, that comes down to a coach. Like that kind of level of this really inaccuracy. It's like people playing on wrong wavelengths.
Yeah.
So the idea of trying to break that down is difficult, which makes it, the whole game is just kind of muddling. Like, it's very uninspiring because of that. Even just players who aren't terrible, but certainly aren't great. Like Murray, Sexton, this has been a feature of them throughout this tournament again. It's very it's slightly dampening after the year we came off as well, just that kind of team.
Other than Stockdale you know, his try, so that came off an Italian mistake and knock on, and just a clean run through, good finish. And Earls, when he went through and was sandwiched by the two players, which even that wasn't the smartest play by Earls, but it was a line break. And I think Stockdale might have done it once more. I don't remember any clear line breaks. And Italy have improved, and we'll talk about them in a minute, okay? But in the last 2 games Ireland have played Italy, we've beat them by a combined 90 points.
Yeah.
90 points. Ireland had their way with them over the last 2 years. And for those to be the only 2 proper line breaks that I remember in the game, there's definitely a third one, another one by Stockdale hanging in there somewhere, but that's it. Like, that to me is, no matter what Italy have done to shape up their defence, is shocking. That something could change so much in 12 months.
And see, I wonder is to what extent, Ian Costa spoke to us the other day about the obsession, like his word was the obsession with line speed, and he said that is something you have to be fixated on throughout a week to have it down to a level. And it's clear that wasn't something they're fixated on for a week, because we've all been talking about their attacking platform. So they're like, you're not talking about your defense against Italy. It's not a focus. That's why your line speed is slow. But then when you look at the actual attacking platform, if that's something you've been fixating on a week, why is that level of an action? Like, surely you're more in sync if that's what you're dwelling up towards. And the fact that that's not there is kind of a worry. It's also a worry the amount of times when something goes wrong. So a set piece is dropped forward, or the ball is like a ball off the top drops in front of the scrum half, in this case Murray, as opposed to going to hand. How it seems that everything else goes wrong after it. Their ability to play off the cuff once. Yeah. Like, I'm sure like the set pieces they have down, these strike plays, they seem to know them. But when something goes wrong within that, there seems to be no continuity plan. There seems to be like no ability to go back to your skill set, or like, and
it's good. They're good enough rugby players to manage that. They don't need everything drawn up for them.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, I as I said before, I think Italy were actually good. I think that it can be both true that Ireland were quite poor and Italy were quite good, and that ultimately it just comes down to like it's somewhere in between where it's an okay but not a great performance.
It was the best Italy performance in a long time, as you mentioned to me off air. But you're 100% right. Like, that, it's the best Italy we've seen against Ireland since 2013 when they beat them. Now, one thing you mentioned there was line speed. The Italian defence was very good. It was very disciplined. They were basically doing the England thing of not committing to the ruck and making sure they had numbers in the line. But to me, watching it, I was at our Guinness Clear event in the old storehouse watching the game with Paddy Wallace, and he can explain things to me a lot better than I can. But even to my naked eye, watching it on a big screen as not a non-rugby expert, the Italian line speed was, I would say, close to double the speed of Ireland's.
Yeah.
They were on the line. They were ready to go. Ireland were half a yard deeper and waited for the tackle, waited for the runner. Every time. Not every time. Every time's unfair. We never got into their backfield, to use a American football term. Yeah. At all. And this is something that's 3 games in a row now. We just don't have that style of defence, and that's fine. But that is where the game is going, and that's why our attack can't get going. And Italy, how many times did they run through us, Mars? You know? I don't care how good they are. That was a shoddy defensive performance in the loose.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that is down to the amount of like lack of consistency. I think it's a real feature of this team. They want to be in control. Like, they don't like the idea that Keith Earls is parachuted in at centre, or that you're suddenly like the players are dropping off out of position, or like I think the biggest health sign for me was that clearly line speed wasn't an issue for them during the week, and that's why you might see lackluster performance. And then players come off the bench, and instantly there's a massive rise. Like, Van der Fleer was sprinting up. It was clearly something that was like, that's all it takes. Like, a coach pointing out to you, by the way, and you come on here, you're shooting up, you're setting the bar for everybody else.
Why couldn't they do that at half time?
I don't know. Like, it's a good question, and I mean, I'm sure there is an answer, and maybe people who know more about coaching defenses are able to answer that, but I don't know. I think at halftime, again, you're talking about, like, if you're to make a hierarchy as a coach, hierarchy of issues, you're starting with the attacking platforms. Like, you're starting with strike plays that keep going to ground, players running wrong lines, the ball not going to hand. Really, like, these are skill issues, and the reason that's kind of perplexing for people to analyze is because they obviously have the level of skill to execute this. Like, they've done so before, and the fact that it's letting them down now is like, it almost hints at, and this is a real armchair pundit point, it almost hints at like a mentality issue that maybe like Shane Byrne is something he's really heavy on at the minute on Virgin Media, is the idea of body language. And I'm not a body language expert, I don't know about that, but just the idea that it's levels of the game, like, they patently obviously have, like it's not better, but you would understand if the scrum was massively malfunctioning, or you would understand if somebody was having a horror show from their kicking game. But it isn't that. It's something much more fundamental. It's
I want to talk about the body language thing. It's an interest. I read that with interest. It's hard to disagree with, even as you say, we're not body language experts, right? I just want to give one comparison. In the 2007 World Cup, when Ireland were massively fancied again, and we went in and we played Namibia and Georgia, and we're very, very lucky to win both games and incredibly lucky to beat Georgia. Whatever, we just didn't play well against Namibia. And everyone was saying, we're easing into the tournament, it's going to be fine next week, but you sensed something was wrong. And in the second half against Georgia, when it looked like the game was getting away from us, and this isn't even the Georgia of now, never mind, which you'd still expect Ireland to beat by 50 points. And it just felt like this isn't going to click. And then we went out and we were hammered to France or Argentina or whatever way order the game came in. I can't remember. I think it was France next, and then we lost to Argentina in the game to get into the quarterfinals. And it never got going. And body language was an issue. And you just felt there was something wrong. But you didn't know what it was. We didn't hear any stories. There was anything. Years later, everybody has their books. Everybody tells their stories. Brian O'Driscoll retires and tells all the stories. It was an unhappy and a camp that wasn't ready and wasn't focused, didn't have their head fully in tune in what they should be doing. They weren't at the right level. They weren't at the right pitch, I suppose is the best way to describe it. I hope this is just a Six Nations thing for this team, and there's plenty of time for them to change it, because they are still good enough, and the World Cup's not until October, but it feels the same at the moment.
Go on. I think it would take, it takes one cobwebs blowing spectacular performance to right that.
That was supposed to be this weekend.
Maybe, yeah. Like they do have two. Yeah, maybe. They do still have two more chances. I think from a coach's perspective, those stuff clicking doesn't take. That's not months. You're not talking about learning new strike plays. You're not talking about revolutionizing your lineouts. You're talking about maybe stop having such a big reliance on. I went back over it. Tadhg Furlong was involved in 5 of the first 6 lineouts as a lifter. So you've got already there's a massive emphasis on him. So then to use him to contribute as a strike player constantly in the league, I wonder is that expecting too much, or is that very predictable? Suddenly, there was that famous Scotland game where all they did was follow John Hayes as a lifter. Are we getting to that extent now with Tadhg Furlong? 5 of those lifts were from the back, 1 was from the front. So anybody who knows anything about rugby will know that's stressful, that's taxing. So suddenly he's becoming more of a set piece placed player, and that has knock-on effects in terms of your ability to use him as a ball carrier or use his hands. I wonder these are really subtle things that I wonder it might just take another 2-week gap now. They might all come together for the France game. Yeah,
look, the whole thing is fascinating. I think it's fair to say. We'll talk probably more about Italy when we get to the team of the tournament, because I wouldn't mind. It's only fair to talk about them a little bit. But before we leave Ireland and we get to Alan, is there any? I'm being very negative. I know I am. They still got a bonus point win away from home. Yeah. Is there anything to be said for the fact that they did come from behind and go out and just get the job done and get the hell out of Dodge?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't give them a huge amount of credit for that either. Which again is why it's such a in many ways it's a boring game to analyze. You don't really want to. There's not enough there to absolutely slate them. There's also not enough to give them a huge amount of credit. It was a really middling performance. It was a bonus point win away in Rome. As a result, that's good. As a performance, it certainly wasn't. And you just kind of I wonder, is this going to be one of those games you just park and move on? It's a game that we probably won't even remember next year.
Yeah. Last question. Knowing the players involved, I don't believe this to be the truth. Paddy Wallace dismissed it yesterday when somebody asked it. They're too professional for it, but I think it has to be brought up that we found out after November, when everybody was on top of the world, that the coach was leaving. He's basically a lame duck coach now, even though he's got a tournament and a half to go, the World Cup and the rest of this. Any impact?
I mean,
psychologically,
do you think so?
I don't actually know.
If that is the case, I've heard that. I saw that put up on Twitter as well. But if that is the case, why is that not affecting Wales, who seem to be totally content with what they're doing? Just total clarity in their messaging. Gatland is also leaving. He's been there longer than Schmidt has. If anything, the continuity after that is a lot worse.
Maybe they're happy to get rid of him.
But they don't look that way, though, do they?
We'll talk about Wales in a few minutes. But speaking of Wales, we've got the Dragons kicking and skills coach, Alan Kingsley, on the line with us at the moment. Alan, how are you getting on?
Good, thanks. Great to be with you.
Thanks a million for joining us. It's a funny time, I suppose, over there during the Six Nations, kind of players everywhere. The Pro 14 game, the Pro 14 kind of kicks on in relative obscurity, I suppose. What's it like, kind of like trying to kind of keep going with the day job when the whole world, especially in your part of the world, all the eyes of the world were on Cardiff?
For sure, there's a big media focus, and it's all gone to the international game now instead of the Pro 14. But I suppose we have to stay digging in and keep going. It's a standard block for us. It's a big block, very important in terms of trying to pick up a few points during it when other teams are down some international players. So it's very much standard for us. Standard weeks, although we are down a few players, but it's still very much business as usual for the Pro 14.
Yeah, it's been a tough kind of season for you guys, and like obviously Bernard moving on before Christmas. It's, you know, has, I suppose, when you're in a competition like the Pro 14, and there's always the criticism and the worry among the Welsh regions about everything that's going wrong. Is like, how much do you get to kind of take stock of the wider picture, or is everything for you just a kind of a day-to-day, it's coaching, very much being a coach for the players that are available to you?
Yeah, for sure. That's my biggest role, is trying to make the individuals better, and all that stuff is going on, but it's well above my station. So I'm just trying to look after my own little area and go about the day-to-day running of the skills department, and what happens above my head will happen, and I won't have any influence on that. But for me and the rest of the coaches at the moment, the focus is on Ulster for next week. We have them on Sunday, and we're not really, we can't really focus on anything else bar this Ulster fixture.
And I'm curious, the Six Nations has kind of been an interesting trend with regards to kicking. I think there was an obsession with whether or not teams are playing 2-4-2 or 1-3-3-1, and it's kind of, you look at England, for example, and the kicking game they're playing. Like, what do you make of this kind of resurgence of especially attacking kicking in the game?
Yes, it's become massive, and I suppose that's part of the reason why I got the job, was to look at the kicking area over here. There wasn't a kicking coach in the club before I came there, and the attacking kicking game is massive. We saw England kind of put it to really good use against Ireland, and a lot of the teams in the Pro 14 are using the attacking shorter kicks as a real weapon this year, and it's trying to find the weakness in the defence, or to manipulate the defence in certain areas of the field where we can get that option to put the attacking kicks in. So it's something that we're looking at the Dragons really heavily, and we're getting some reward out of it, but there's still a lot of improvement to go.
Is that a reaction to the defensive lines that we've seen? We had Ian Costello on the show recently, who spoke about this new obsession with line speed and about packing the line with as many players as possible. So presumably there's more space in the backfield because of that. Like, is that something that you're training out halves or scrum halves to maybe try and spot, and these kind of low grubbers in behind are a tactic now?
Yeah, for sure. Well, most teams would have the backfield fairly well covered. So a lot of the kicks are coming from the edge players, so 13s, fullbacks, wingers, rather than the 9s and the 10s. The 9s and 10s kind of for us is more contestable style, maybe your box kicks or your crossfield kicks that are contestable, or kicks crossfield to score. But a lot of the kicking opportunities now are coming from the back three players and maybe your outside centre. So it's really important for us to be able to get the ball to them channels and to manipulate plays. So it gives us that opportunity in the wider channels. But yeah, big focus on us is trying to get the balance right between obviously attacking and keeping the ball, and when the right time is to kick the ball as well. So yeah, obviously 9s and 10s do spend a lot of the time, and it's their bread and butter to kick the ball, but we're concentrating on maybe the wider channels, getting some kicking opportunities in as well.
Yeah, on that point actually, the box kick, I think, is something that's often maligned by rugby fans. I think they might not necessarily understand the value of it. Like, from your own perspective, can you maybe give us some insight into why that's such a well-used tactic by a team like Ireland, for example?
Yeah, I suppose no team wants to really overplay in certain areas of the field, so the box kick kind of gives you a 50-50 chance maybe, or 60-40 chance of getting the ball back. And I suppose teams will play for 3 or 4 phases in their own half. If they're not getting any momentum, or they're not breaking down the defence, they will get the ball maybe to an edge and start kicking it. They obviously playing in the right areas of the field is massive in the modern game, and the box kick, while you're also getting to the right area of the field, you have a chance to get the ball back as well. So it's kind of it's a tool that you'd use maybe when you're not getting much joy after 2 or 3 phases in certain areas of the field. So very important tool, really.
The idea of specifying in kicking as a coach is an interesting one, I think, especially given that as a player you played as an out half. Was that something that you were kind of conscious of, that this was an area you were going to make as your specialist skill?
I suppose it all started out in Australia for me with the Western Force. I got to link up with Andrew Scottney, who was kicking and skills coach with the Force, and I didn't even realise that there was the opportunity to box yourself off as a kicking coach, but it's just materialised from there. As a 9 and a 10 when I was playing, it's a part of the game that I really enjoyed. So I'm really interested in that side of the coaching. You get to work technically with players to try and improve them technically, and then you have also the decision making process as to when to kick the ball is the right decision. So it's a coaching role that I wasn't really aware of. I was a bit ignorant about it really until I met Andrew out in Australia.
And so when you look at the trends elsewhere, like we just spent a lot of time there talking about the kicking currently in Six Nations, like I'm wondering, to what extent does that influence your own philosophy? Are you looking at what maybe Ireland or Wales do, and is there anything from that you can implement in your own coaching? Yeah,
I think all coaches kind of have their own kind of DNA, and they're always trying to, nearly like magpies, kind of rob from other coaches. And every time you're just looking at Rock and Michaels there on the TV today, you're looking at every level of rugby trying to pinch some ideas and seeing why they're doing certain things in certain areas. But it's something that you would sit down and watch rugby and question, why are they doing this or why are they kicking the ball there? But I suppose at the end of the day, it is an attacking option, and we want to score. So in certain areas of the field, when you're kicking the ball, you're kicking to score, not just to get the ball to space. So important.
You touched on being in Australia there a second ago, Alan. I suppose we haven't really talked about your own story as a kind of an Irish player playing out half, and then going out to Australia to play rugby, which is something that not very many people do, and something we talk about a lot about Irish players kind of going abroad, and it tends to be France and England and different places, but so few go to the kind of southern hemisphere. How did you end up out in Australia?
I played underage rugby with a guy called Andrew Finn, who was in Australia playing with that club, and he just got in contact with me saying that the club that he was playing with out there were looking for an out half, and there was a package there to go out and to play for a few months. And the way the seasons cross over, I was able to go during the summer and come back for another AIL season. So I said, why not? I'd give it a go. And one thing led from another then. Andy was the main reason I ended up in Australia.
That's class. And you ended up playing out for 3 years out there, and you mentioned your kind of coaching, genesis, I suppose, started there. But, for me, one of the more, like, rugby is such a strange game in a way, and because like every country has its own kind of distinct culture, and you always find that somebody who's been somewhere else, that you can meld in the two, say the Irish and Australian, to start with. In your case, it really helps kind of like develop a kind of a unique kind of coaching philosophy, I suppose. That like it's almost something that you'd love everyone that kind of gets into that sort of side of the game to have that experience of.
Yeah, I think you can see that as well. There was an article there a few weeks ago, I think in the Independent, called The Wild Geese, and it highlighted the Irish people all over the world that were coaching and playing, and there's a massive amount of us spread all over the place and getting that experience. You've obviously Ronan down in the Southern Hemisphere. Yeah. Mike, Prendy and Paul are in France, so they're obviously getting loads of experience there. But yeah, again, it comes back to every kind of coach has their own ideas on the game, and the broader your mindset is, and the more experiences you get, I presume, the more you can add to that and pinch ideas from different areas of the world and mix them all together in your own little way, and hopefully have a good remedy.
Yeah, absolutely. Just another thing, actually, you mentioned we were talking off air briefly about a couple of interesting teammates that you had in your time in Western Australia. Yeah.
Well, the very similar to the way the AIL is run, and each player over there was allocated a club. So we were lucky that Pocock was with our club. We had Nick Cummins, Rory Sidey, Nathan Charles, Sam Wykes. So we had a good few top players playing with us. And the first game we played, Pocock was 7 for us, and James O'Connor was 10 for the opposition. And I was there going, oh God, I'm out of my depth here. But It was a good learning curve for me down there, and we were lucky enough to be involved in a really good team, and we actually ended up going to win the Premiership that year. So, great experience I had down in Australia.
To go back to your current role now with the Dragons, the idea there, I suppose, I know Bernard Jackman spoke about this as well. It was about not so much technical stuff as well as a culture. Like, from your own perspective, what would your ambition for Welsh club rugby be moving forward?
I suppose just solely on the Dragons, I suppose we're on a journey trying to improve. There's been a lot of change around the club in the last 2 years, from the WRU taking ownership, a lot of players coming in, a lot of new staff. Each area of the staff, S&C, medical, rugby, there's extra numbers in all those areas. So we know we're on a journey to try become a Champions Cup team in 2-3 seasons time, however long that takes. And kind of the culture we're trying to create is that winning culture, but we know it's going to take time, and we know there's going to be ups and downs along the way.
Was it hard for you to did you have to make a decision when Bernard left to stick around or to stay? It's obviously difficult with the person that you went over with, you know.
In terms of staying after Bernard left, not really. No, I have a 2-year contract over here. Unfortunately, it's part of professional rugby, and Bernard unfortunately lost his job before Christmas, but I didn't have the opportunities to get another coaching job or to go back to a different job. So we set out our stall here as a family to move for 2 seasons, and no matter what's going to happen in those 2 seasons, we hope to see it out, you know.
Alan, I know we spoke about this as a player. We've spoken to other players about this as well, but the idea of coaches moving abroad, especially like you now working in Wales, I know you do your experience in Australia as well, that surely is a symbol of what the strength of what that might mean for Irish rugby. Like, presumably eventually those kind of coaches can come back and contribute to the provincial or to the national team as well.
I think it's everyone's ambition to coach in their home country eventually. It's and getting the experience abroad might stand to us somewhere down the line. But yeah, I can only speak for myself. I'm looking to get as much experience in Wales and see where it takes me after Wales, maybe France. Who knows? I'm open to anything at the moment. But eventually, at the end of the day, there is no place like home, and to coach in Ireland would be a goal for down the line. How far away that is, I'm not quite sure.
We talked earlier on about the kicking specifically so far in the Six Nations, and England especially kind of like raising the bar in an attacking kicking sense. As a coach, other than that, when you watch these games, obviously it's almost a set piece every year between this and maybe the Rugby Championship, where it's like, here come this is what the top coaches have laid out as the sort of the new style, and this what sticks and what doesn't. Has anything kind of stuck out to you watching the games so far that maybe we might have missed?
I don't think so. I think for me, defences have kind of been on top in this year's Six Nations. The physicality around the breakdown, trying to slow the ball down, and I think that's been a big effect on Ireland. Really, is teams have managed to slow the ball down, and Ireland's kind of game plan is about speed of ball, and that's my own thoughts on it. So just massive emphasis on defence, and as attack coaches trying to outsmart defence coaches at the moment. And I think defence coaches have the upper hand through physicality and line speed and closing down the attacking threats quite well. Yeah.
Brilliant stuff. Well, look, hopefully, I think although I have to say I've enjoyed a lot of the defensive games so far, but I think as we head into a World Cup, maybe we think the attacking coaches might be able to get the upper hand in the months to come. But Alan, the very best luck with the rest of the season with the Dragons. We hope it goes well for you, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks very much for having me, lads.
Thanks so much. Alan Kingsley there, skills and kicking coach with the Dragons in the struggling Dragons in the Pro 14, but just time to turn that around there. Interesting, getting on with the Pro 14 business when there's such a kind of a massive event happening in whatever about Ireland in Rome, and the Irish provinces having to play, the Welsh regions having to play while they're hosting England in this massive occasion in Cardiff is bizarre, really, isn't it?
Yeah, especially we actually brought this up before the Six Nations. We thought that Treviso would have a massive drop off because of the amount of numbers they contribute to their national team, and if anything, it's probably been the opposite. Like, there's been other. I think you're looking. This is a really interesting chance to see the reliances certain teams have on set players. Like Munster have torn it up since they've been their players have gone away. Treviso likewise. Whereas like Dragons are missing, like Ross Moriarty is huge. It's such a massive loss for them, and that it's really kind of, it's tangible. Like you can see the effect that losing these big game players has on teams with just that not that degree of depth.
Yeah, Zebra as well. Like, you know, gone from competitive to losing by 50 points to Ulster, and you know, because they can't handle losing the internationals. But it's amazing that Treviso now can. That's a new thing, and they give the Dragons a hiding, you know. So that is an interesting development, I suppose, for Italian rugby. And we were obviously talking a bit about Italy earlier. We're going to get to your team of the Six Nations in a minute. Yeah. But I just wanted to stop on Cardiff, the occasion, Wales versus England. I was saying to you earlier, outside of Ireland matches, I keep thinking it's like that was my favourite rugby match since last year's England and Wales game. It probably topped that actually, but that was a class game last year. And then the 2015 World Cup, the group stages game where England kicked the touch, or didn't kick the touch.
Yeah. The choice at the very end. It was went down infamously as bad game management, not to take your points. And
Lancaster and Farrell were the bad guys.
Yeah, even though it's a captain's call. Like, but anyway.
Yeah. Even though. So, but anyway, just there's something. Like, there's always something about England and Wales. I could start talking to you about Scott Gibbs scoring in Wembley in 1999 if you want, but especially lately, it's just become this class rivalry. There was an amazing atmosphere in Cardiff, and then it was just a brilliant game of rugby. Yeah, it was just so enjoyable. Defense heavy, absolutely, but it just shows you, like, you know, if that game ended 5-5, you would have been happy with it because it was just really, really high quality stuff on both ends of the ball.
Yeah, and I also think there's like you're further invested in the game when it's so patently obvious how much they care. Like it was after the game, but you were constantly aware of like Adam and Jones, what it meant to him, like this like kind of titanic struggle, like for him anyway, especially like trying to rouse him up. The Sinclair stuff I thought was really interesting. Like
Gatlin predicted it.
He did, but even like the players were obvious. It was obviously like it was a tactic. If you watch that back when he has the high tackle and he's holding on to Adam Jones around the neck, so Wyn Jones is like pointing out to the referee, and then when he falls to the ground, he turns around and laughs at him. He laughs at Sinclair from the floor. Like, it was so apparently obvious that he knew who had him around the neck, and he also knew he was going to exploit that for a penalty. Like,
and I think that was the second or third in quick succession at that stage, because he'd run into the runner just before and got away with it, and then turn into him. Yeah, Alan Wyn Jones pointing at his neck as the referee to get a penalty is one of the. It was just, I caught it live, and then they showed the slow motion replay. I just thought it was so funny. And what's the referee supposed to do? You actually have to give the penalty. He's got him around the neck, you know, even if it's not dangerous. But Wales were brilliant, and like Anscombe, I thought was poor and was kind of kicking them out of the game. Really, I thought they were probably better, you know, 15 versus 15, and I thought their out half was kicking them out of the game. Bigger came on, and it wasn't just that amazing crossfield try for Adams, the winning try, the taking the bonus point away from England try, but the Bigger's just performance in general was fantastic when he came on. You think he has to start. I do want to talk a little bit about Anscombe though, because we were talking about kicking with Alan there a few minutes ago. The tactic of obviously trying to go around the England high pressing defence by these little kind of chip kicks through. I'm watching it and I'm going, they're so predictable. They're all too long. None of them worked out. You know, and one of them did, and it was because of a mistake from the England fullback, from Daly, who let it bounce too far and it went around him, and England still got out of it with a penalty. But that was the only one that even nearly worked out. And all of Twitter is like, you know, what's Anscombe doing? It just feels to me like that was a tactic that probably wasn't properly executed by the out half, rather than him making bad decisions. Yeah,
see, I wonder, like I wondered that. I think that Dan Biggar would have started this game if he hadn't. I think I don't particularly want to be this guy, but I think Gatlin doesn't get nearly enough credit for the way he manages his team. Like, Biggar got injured in the off week, came off with an injury, so he had to manage Dan Biggar. I actually think Dan Biggar would have started and would have gone to this rangy kicking game that he has himself, but because he couldn't start, and because I think Gatlin knew they could be in the game with 20-25 minutes left, he started Anscombe, and then you tailor to his skill set. Like, he isn't the long spired into the corners kicker. What he is kind of like more of like a Finn Russell,
a game maker,
And but even the idea, like this is really subtle, but I think it's actually really clever. The England's line speed was something that Ireland kind of couldn't work out how to get around it, and instead you've got a guy like Gareth Davies, who just like it's not a feint, but it's a second hold before he passed the ball, and somebody shoots out of the line, and twice he got pulled them for being offside.
Yeah.
By just and he was straight away in the referee's ear once they did shoot up out of the line, because he was obviously conscious of that. I think that's what Anscombe was trying to do, was trying to exploit that as well.
Yeah.
But that is you look at England's biggest. We always talk about this with coaching. You look at their biggest weapon and you find out ways around it, and that was what Davies was doing there. It's also what I think Anscombe was trying to do. It also, I mean, I think you're right. It probably wasn't the right tactic in the first place.
But I am actually saying that, you know, that I'd be interested in seeing that executed better, because I think that Gatland had identified that. I don't think Anscombe decided to kick the ball 10 times through the middle. You know, there was obviously something there. He wasn't executing properly. Maybe he wasn't picking his moments correctly, or whatever it was. It didn't work, because it was clearly a very well coached game. And that's kind of the point that you're making there, was kind of my original point, is like Gatland did everything right, almost except that.
Yeah.
And I'd be just very interested to see what that plan almost meant to be.
Yeah.
Because he had England. He knew what England's defence was all the way through, and that was what made it so fascinating for me. You're right about what Davis was doing. I thought he was fantastic. I thought that their pick and drive, their one out running was brilliant. It was so much better than Ireland's, and they exploited the middle of the empty ruck, which you need to do as well. And it was just such a blueprint for everything Ireland didn't do in Dublin against England. Now, they had 3 weeks' notice on England's new defensive structure, and that, you know, to give Schmidt his due, you know, Gatland is like, you'd imagine that he would be able to manage that too. But I just thought that Wales had an answer for everything, and they still barely won the game, because this is a brilliant England team, you have to admit as well. So just everything about it was just fantastic, and just to have that kind of highlight reel winning try as well just kind of put the cherry on top as well.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah. So we'll get on to your team, your rolling team of the Six Nations. How many changes? We had
4, I think.
4 changes. There was 4 changes after week 1 as well. So let's get going. I imagine a few Welsh lads are coming into it.
Exactly, yeah. And I guess like what we need to stress before I actually get into this team really quickly is this is based off 3 games. It's not like you can't spin around and react after this weekend. Just
3 games all together. I'm going to be the one doing that. You tell me to shut up when I do, okay? You tell me how bad I don't know, Josh Adams was against...
Josh Adams is still there.
Okay, okay. But for example, if Ken Owens was useless against France, you can tell me that when I'm arguing for him.
So Rob Kearney was in a fullback. That was just based off his comeback game. But I think Liam Williams now, that's 2 really good performances.
Man of the match.
Yeah, so Liam Williams...
Unbelievably good under the high ball for someone that wasn't even really a fullback up until recently.
Yeah, and also his, like, the animation after he catches a ball, the ability, like, I wanted, he got isolated, got up, got absolutely nailed when he got to the ground, but wriggled his way and got a really long place back that he actually made it like a pro of it anyway, like it became a platform, even despite the fact that he was like steamrolled.
Yeah, and when he's not under pressure, it's a counter attack immediately. It's like kicking down Hog's throat.
Yeah, exactly.
At the moment with Williams back there, it's a great weapon.
So speaking of that back 3, Josh Adams of Wales stays. Henry Slade was at 13 from England. He's gone for Jonathan Davies of Wales. 2 totally opposite players. Like I think Slade's ability so far in this tournament has been his offensive weapons in terms of his kicking game. Davies, I think, actually hasn't been as big a carrier as you might think, but his defensively he's been absolutely incredible.
His defense was amazing. I think Slade's unlucky there, I have to say.
But
I love Davis as well. So
it's funny. Like I went back and watched the game, and Slade only had 1 pass. This is not down to his fault. This is down to coaching. But he was totally underutilized against Wales. I think he had 1 pass and 1 kick in the entire game.
Yeah.
But
given the first 2 performances, I suppose.
Which I mean, is totally fair. So based off those two first performances, Manu Tuilagi stays, even though I thought he was actually quite poor at the weekend. But I don't think there's as somebody with a level of performance like Davies to knock him out, if you know what I mean.
Who would be up there with him at 12?
See, it's a good question because there's been so much variance elsewhere. Like, I thought Massey was really good at the weekend, but he was actually kind of shifting across to 13 for Italy. Ireland had like Bundyaki, but then he gets injured, and that hasn't been
playing well anyway. Not by his November's form.
And so like the competition for him itself, like Wales have so many changes. Scotland, have so many changes in their centre partnership. I thought the best partnership that France have had so far is the Gael Ficao and Bastro combination, but Ficao was played. The only other game he played was at 13. So
fair enough.
Johnny May stays.
Johnny May, yeah.
He like his presence in the air is something that I don't understand why they don't utilize it more. Like he's even these tap backs that he gets. Like he doesn't claim the ball, but he just gets up and taps the ball back around him. It's like it just kicked out wide to him. Owen Farrell stays. That's
don't like Johnny May, by the way, but anyway, he's a good player. Best winger in the tournament.
Owen Farrell of England also stays. Tito Tabellini, the Italian scrum half. I thought he was man of the match at the weekend. I know Ireland won the game, but nevertheless, he's not only his presence in terms of his passing ability, what he does defensively in terms of turnovers, an absolute nuisance.
He was fantastic.
I personally thought he was man of the match. I thought his try against Scotland, that was entirely self-crafted. That wasn't a move. I think that was a little bit of personal innovation. He's a guy who doesn't have a huge amount of caps, and I mean,
no, but he kept watching the game yesterday. There was about 5 times I'm like, oh, Tebaldi is their new talisman. Italy always have the one talisman, and it's been Parise for a long time, but it's been in different positions over the years, and it just felt like I don't remember a scrum half since Troncon making as big an impact for them as that, and it just seemed like that. To be honest, I thought Gareth Davis did well enough in that one game alone, and against I suppose not that much of a higher standard that he was playing against. Yeah. But I wouldn't necessarily argue with that decision, actually.
And just on that for a second, it's really funny that you said that with Tranquil. It's something I was thinking about during the week. Like there was that Shane Horgan comment that went kind of viral on Twitter during the week about this is one of the worst Italian teams that we've seen in a while. Like they don't. In a way, I can understand where he's coming from, because they don't have Parise wasn't playing, Negrini wasn't playing. They don't have a Massi, a Castrogiovanni, a Bergamasco. They don't have those players. But when you're talking about Italy, in my own opinion, you have to take it in context of, we spoke about the Rising Club game. Conor O'Shea is visiting those and directly training them. Their under 20s had the highest average finish in the World Championships last year. Their under 18s bet France. Their under 17s bet England. First time ever. In terms of as a team, you're not talking about individuals. As a team,
true,
all the stuff that we would have associated with Italian rugby has been slowly eroded. Like their conditioning, after an hour they die. That was the famous thing. I can remember that as a kid. Yeah. That's no longer there. We've seen Treviso had late comebacks as their own players. The same thing is true of Italy. In terms of actual structures, if you talk about what I'm talking about is set pieces, your line-out or your scrum. They've had the best line-out in the tournaments, A guy like Giraldini, who is their hooker, is also a massive contribution with 24 tackles in the loose. I think there's huge signs.
And Ireland's lack of line breaks, like I mentioned earlier, which I'm criticising Ireland for. Yeah. You have to give Italy credit for that as well. They're organised at the breakdown. They're not giving away the silly penalties that they give away a high number at one stage in the first 10 minutes. I think they gave away 5, but it wasn't for just silly ill discipline,
It's penalties with the view of doing something. They're trying to slow down. Ireland want to control the ball. They want on their own terms. So they're lying all sides of a ruck, which is clearly disciplinary is wrong. So they're arguing with penalties, but it's with the view of inhibiting Ireland. They've got. I think the example of good coaching in action is a team at the very end not really conscious of what's happening, and Conor O'Shea standing on the sideline and saying, "You've kicked the points because we need the bonus kick." Now, so that's good coaching to take control there. What the problem is players at their disposal. So you try and maximize what you have at your disposal. So if that player is of a slightly lesser standard, like Ian McKinley, who's a fine kicker, but he just pulled it right. He just didn't have the ability to execute it. But the idea is all there. I think it's kind of harsh to Italy. I actually often wonder, I people judge them as a fixed marker. Like you're saying, well, they didn't beat Ireland this time, they didn't beat Ireland last time. But every other team is improving too. You can't.
We've said that. And look, it's 2 games in a row that have run close. So just quickly I'll run through your backs again. It's Tebaldi and Farrell with Tuilagi and Jonathan Davis coming in with Adams, Williams and Johnny May as the back three. Yeah, so your forwards.
So this is another really controversial one. Cian Healy comes out and Dave Kilcoyne comes in. My argument for this is, I've gone through it, and any player you would consider putting in is off one performance. There's nobody like Macavinapola was in, but he then got injured and is out for the rest of the tournament. You've got then Cian Healy comes in after one great game, but then he doesn't play against Italy. Ben Moon comes in for England. That's one game. You're judging, all these are being judged off one game. Adam Dell was good at the weekend, I actually thought, but he was terrible against Ireland. He was at fault for, I think he's a bit inability to see that Conor Murray was standing and fixing him in the lineup. He was also at fault for the try when he nailed Sexton, and they took the gap there, started to took the gap. So it's one performance that you would have to make for any decision, which is why I thought David Coyne was one of Ireland's best players.
He was,
weekend, so which is why I put him in. 2, Geraldini stays, the Italian hooker. I just think he's been incredible this tournament. I think I can totally appreciate why people make a case for Ken Owens. Yeah. And even, to be honest, I thought Jamie George had 2 really good games as well.
He did, yeah.
But I just think that in terms of the importance for somebody like Geraldini, like you spoke about these like icons. He is in that kind of bracket now for Italy, and his contribution in both, like a lot of those players who are like someone like Stuart McNally is great in the set piece and maybe slightly lesser in the loose, or like Ken Owens is a different example now. It's not fair because he's actually great in both. No, but I just think in terms
but he's been a leader and a talisman. The lineout's nigh on perfect. I think possibly even has been on his throw, and they've lost 2. Have they?
He's only lost 1. He's been responsible for the one that Peter Mahoney intercepted. That was his first mistake leading to a lineout
in the whole tournament, and his tackle count has been through the roof. So you add all those things together, and you can't really argue with you, tight head.
Kyle Sinclair, I know that's a question. I thought he was having a stormer until the meltdown, so I don't think you can take him out of it. I don't think. I mean, these are pretty self-explanatory. Adam Wynne-Jones obviously doesn't come out of it. Courtney Laws obviously doesn't come out of it, even though he's out for the rest of the tournament. So presumably he will eventually come out of it. Mark Wilson does come out because we finally have another Irish player back in. Peter Mahoney, I think, without him, I actually think that game was probably questionable. I think not only his. I'm talking about leadership, like these moments where, like a Peter Mahoney steal. I know you're a big fan of that.
I am. There was 2 of them.
And what it does for the, like in terms of killing momentum, but also what it does for Ireland as a team, like the fact that we've wrestled it back and they use that as a platform.
And his line out's so good as well.
As a jumper. And then finally, again, no change. Justin Tipuric at open side for Wales and Josh Navidi at 8 for Wales. 2 players who don't come out, so there's not much change there.
Curry should be in there at 7.
Do you think so? Yeah.
Yeah. I think so. I'd have to analyze his first 2 games, or like or his France game anyway. More. But I just thought he was a good bit better than Tipuric at the weekend.
I mean, I think actually I thought Curry bar the.
And when you play against each other and you outshine a guy, and especially such a specialist position like 7, I think you take it for granted that you've passed that guy out. Then
like the case for, I think Curry absolutely. But so the just to look over his games, like the Ireland game, it was really stupid penalty to give away, and he was deservedly sent to the bin. I think that was probably a tactic that they're going after Earl. So I don't know if you can necessarily blame him for that too much. I also think on the other side of that, I think Justin Tipuric was wrongly blamed for his try, for Justin Curry's try where he picked and went down the pillar line there. I actually think that is Ken Owens' job. If you're any defensive setup I've ever seen, the pillar doesn't move. Like if it's from outside pillar that you step across, and he tried to get somebody to stand in on the pillar. He tried to move across there.
Don't turn your back on the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fair enough too.
For as long as he did, I know getting in a position, he just seemed like he just was unaware. That's not something I'd hold against him. That's a kind of a possibly a brain fart. You're saying it might not even be his fault. I just thought that Curry was outstanding, and he's a exciting young player. I
totally agree with you. I think Justin Tipuric was definitely man of the match against France. Was also really good. I did think he had 3 good games, which is why he'd say. But I can totally appreciate why.
Okay, we'll post this up on Balls.ie later today. I'd imagine that team. It's look, I mean, I've argued with you for some of them, and I think Robbie's going to kill me because we're about 25 minutes over time. So I'll accept your team, Maurice. You know more than I do, and you're the one putting the time into it, and I'm just coming in and going, no, put him here, put him there. Right, so that's all the time we have for you. We'll be back next Tuesday when we're looking ahead to the France game and talking to another interesting person from around the world of rugby. Until then, take care, and here's hoping that the next time we're talking to you, we're just slightly more positive about where Irish international rugby is going. Take it easy.